All right, welcome to the Land Use Committee meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. We may have a person or two join us, but it's 8:32, so we'll get rolling. Shannon, could you bring up the agenda?
Yes.
And get us going?
Shannon, did you get my chat message?
I did. I will send that to you as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. So good morning, everybody that just joined us. So your recommendations that we finalized a couple of weeks ago, they'll be presented to Planning Commission on Thursday for information only. And then they'll be presented for discussion at City Council on Monday. And then if that goes well, for ratification on, I believe it's August 2nd, the August 2nd City Council meeting. So I guess what we're doing with the other work groups at this point are looking at ways to actually implement the recommendations. So what are the projects that we can move forward that will implement the recommendations that the work group has been working on? So I think I sent to you guys, I put together some ideas for how we could do that. And I've already sent some questions to Mary, and she's getting back to me on some of them. So I've got that we can look at. Do you guys want to start by looking at those? Is that okay with everybody? All right. So 3 of them are listed right here. The first one is explore impact fees. So I think that was on an email thread that went around after our recommendations. Explore offering developer incentives that could potentially fund city public facilities. And explore updating requirement of BAR approval for developments and redevelopments. So, let's see here. I sent Mary a question about impact fees. Specifically, could we require that any new development of a property that's adjacent to a bikeway or a pedestrian pathway on the city's adopted plan, could we require them to build that pathway or give the city an easement to that and pay a fee in lieu of building it? And her response was that in South Carolina, there's a very specific process that you can use to require impact fees from development. And basically you can require them to fund public facilities. And this is their definition. Can you guys see that? Of public facilities. It includes.
I can't.
You can. We can only see the agenda.
Oh my goodness. Hang on.
You might have to stop sharing the agenda.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, can you see it?
No.
No.
Okay.
You can.
Hang on. Let's just stop that all together and try again.
If you have multiple screens, you need to switch screens.
Yeah. All right. How about now?
Yep.
Okay. Second question is, can you read this? The print is kind of small.
Yes.
Okay. So the public facilities that can be funded, basically water supply, wastewater, solid waste and recycling, roads, streets and bridges, stormwater, flood control, public safety facilities, capital equipment and vehicles, and then parks, libraries, and recreational facilities. And The specifics of this question came from Erin Bluvis, who can't make it today to the land use group. But she wanted information on, could you require them to fund, say, the Green Crescent Trail or a bikeway path if it was on a bikeway path? And I'm assuming that if those were adopted by the city, those would be covered under recreational facilities.
Yeah, and also, there's new guidance from SCDOT with complete streets
Okay.
and sidewalks and bike lanes and those kind of things. So I think it's probably also covered under roads, including but not limited to right-of-ways.
Okay.
So I think there's two paths there for where those kind of facilities being recreational and in the right-of-way and part of a road. I think they're both legitimate use of impact fees.
Okay.
David?
Well, I mean, there's two things going on here. One is, in my opinion, every development and every project should be required to put sidewalks to city standards on all streets that their property fronts and internally within their development. So that to me shouldn't be an impact fee. That should just be a land development standard, right?
Yeah.
And then for impact fees would be for things off-site of the development. So the Green Crescent Trail is because it's a citywide resource infrastructure. That's, to me, I think those two things need to be separated. So the development standards should require things on the parcel being developed, and we should have sidewalks. Of course, I see Todd's note, but of course, Patrick Square put sidewalks internally into its development, but didn't put them along its Aquina Trail or Chapman Hill Road. So, my point is that we need to make sure that that all development puts it on existing public right-of-ways as well.
Yeah, so the current land regs, Todd, and you can just type this in the thing, current land regs would have required Patrick Square to do sidewalks on Esquina Trail and Chapman Hill.
And so, for example, the development that's underway across from the 7-Eleven on 93 at the Ingalls intersection, is that going to have sidewalks down both streets? There is a sidewalk on 93 now, but it looks off. The building looks awful tight to the street to accommodate.
I do know in that case, Eric requested, because that's a DOT road, Eric requested with DOT to put in sidewalks and a bike lane and that kind of thing, and got turned down. So when you have DOT roads, there's going to be other issues there that we could potentially run into. Yeah, Jackie has her hand up.
Good morning. I know that we haven't gotten there yet, but all in all, I think incentivizing these things is a really great way to go. If I was a developer, I'd be inclined to do things that are incentives that are good for the city, and it's a win-win, public relations wise, PR wise, and it's great for the city. And things that we're not stuck with 10 years down the road having to fix, we can address up front.
Good comment, Jackie. And the idea of the fee, and I wouldn't call these impact fees where, for example, if we had, redevelopment along 93 and the new land requirement was going to be to build the state to the standard that we want in the future, that's when you have a developer put money into a fund. And I don't know if that qualifies as an impact fee, or if that's a future development fee, because you're not going to have the road where, you've got these little pieces that are done correctly that have big gaps in between them. So that's the idea of them paying into a fund on the front end if there is a future state of development that you need most everybody to be involved in to get there. So there's some differences that we would have to think about, whether they're city roads, whether they're state roads, whether they are, part of a bigger long-term project where it wouldn't make sense to do them one at a time with gaps in between. So there's a lot to think about there.
Well, and here's another thought. I don't know how Eric's communication with the DOT was on that particular project, but it seems to me there would be an argument for home rule that if the city wanted to have a contiguous network of sidewalks and bikeways on its public right-of-ways, then it seems like our requirements should either trump or certainly be in consideration with the Department of Transportation. So, I mean, that's, to me, that's just a ludicrous excuse for not doing it. And there's no rationale whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think it was somewhat unfortunate timing that new guidance from SCDOT came out way late in the game after, the project had started. But I know I had the conversation with Eric that they were turned down. Now, the thing that we get into there is that the state will likely say, well, that's great. If y'all want home rule, y'all can take the road. Please take the road. And then you're taking on an entire, new expense that we would, again, have to think about carefully. Because that's going to add on to our $100+ million roads and infrastructure problem for our city streets that we have now.
Well, I think it would be worth having legal look into, how DOT can prevent something like that and basically trump our land development standards. It just, I don't think
it's the big government conservatives we have in this state. They want to make sure that it's top down.
Yeah, but I don't think we can rely on developers for being our advocates for those kind of things.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to fight hard for that. It's more money, right? Yeah. So, we have to be involved in advocating and requiring that. And then when there's a conflict in my world in architecture, the most restrictive regulation is the guiding factor, right? So when local regulations are in conflict with state regulations, you take the most stringent of the two. You have to honor the most stringent of the two. So I'm not sure what that conversation was about, how hard it was pushed, whether it was used as an excuse not to do it, but it seems very, very odd to me that the state would prevent him from putting sidewalks on a public road.
Yeah. Well. So let me ask here for people in mind. Jackie, is your hand still up from your previous comment?
Yes, I'm gonna put it down.
Okay. And then Chris, then Andy.
Yeah, I think what you have to remember, as an architect or a developer, we're going to do the minimum that's required, and the local codes are the most restrictive that you have to comply with. And I believe, if Andy and Todd may correct me on this, but impact fees are an umbrella term for a lot of things that can be used. And I know Issaquena is a state road, and that's why it took so long to get it repaired. What I don't know is, and maybe you can answer this, is if we take back some of these roads that we want sidewalks on, is there more funding available to us to do what we want to do? And the other, the other thing I think you have to keep in mind too is when developers come in, they're going to do the minimum that a town requires. So we're the ones who set whatever that minimum is. They're not going to offer up anything because it's all about money and development for them. And I wish Tom were here today because he could certainly shed light on that. So those are my comments.
Andy?
I was just gonna say that with encroachment permit, like at Eric's development up there, I've never had the DOT deny a permit that I've applied for to put in sidewalks or anything along a DOT road. But what I learned is they're really easy to work with when you realize that they say what you need to do and then you do it. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room there from their safety and minimum requirements. So you can make it as pretty and nice as you want, but they'll set the minimums. And then you also have to commit to being fully responsible for their upkeep and maintenance in perpetuity. So I don't know what offer Eric went to them with, but if he didn't agree to build it to their certain terms, which I'm thinking would have potentially limited housing density out there, because they're going to require so much room in the buffer. And if his plan was to dump the sidewalks and everything onto DOT for future maintenance, they were going to turn him down. But there's a lot in there. We'd have to know more of the specifics as to why it was denied, and it could have been a flat out safety thing. But when they do that, I mean, it's usually a pretty justifiable reason, but I've never seen that happen. So, I mean, I'm wondering if there's some other stuff in there where if it's required by DOT that we can put in the regulations that any encroachment permit would have to become part of the deal. It's not it's not an option.
Yeah, I've sent a text to Eric to give me a call sometime today so I can get the entire backstory on what happened there. And you know, at the end of the day, it might have been that he decided that the requirements were too, you know, great to do it. But I remember having that conversation with him because he wanted to set it up so it was installed like, you know, kind of a model complete street, and said that he couldn't get their approval for it.
So what happened? Did he just waive? Did we waive the land use requirements then for him? So how did he get around our land use requirements?
Yeah, I never heard from Todd if the streets that it fronts have to have that. And again, if it's a state road, you know, I mean, obviously we've got some things to think about, but if Todd is still on there, if Todd, you know, again, the question was, since Eric's development was after Patrick Square, had Patrick Square been under the current land regs or Eric's being under the current land regs, how is a sidewalk not required if it's not going to be there on Cambridge?
I don't have a complete answer for you right now. I'm trying to pull up the plans, other than I know that it's is a requirement, and that if DOT deny them, probably because of terrain issues, that it would be my guess, but we can find out more from Eric, that would, you know, we can't force something that on property we don't own. But the land regs require development on all right of ways, and that we can't stop a development if they're willing to do it, but DOT won't allow them to do it. I will have to get back with y'all with a more thorough explanation for that. Both Art and Jake are out this week, and so I'll have to backtrack and try to find some documentation on that. But generally speaking, our land regs are pretty clear on that. And this is it's the only parcel I know of that does not have it. And that when I just common sense, when you're out there, that the terrain would make it all but impossible to put a sidewalk along Cambridge Drive. And that would have been true before the development and after. So I don't know. It might have been that he would have had to have encroached upon the vehicular, you know, the lanes of traffic, and DOT didn't want that. to narrow the road there.
So a quick text back from Eric says, neither the city nor the state wanted to pay to maintain them. So that would be something that we would need to put in there. So the city would have had to take
I
over
would take
the
issue
road.
with that with Eric, that I absolutely don't believe that that's the case, that the city ever said we will not pay for the maintenance of the sidewalks.
But he said he went on and said the city would have to take over the whole road, and it doesn't
Yeah,
want to do that.
That part is
Because
true.
at that point, and then so deadlock state would love for cities to take over the roads, but cities can't afford to do that in most cases. So yeah, so we've got some things that we need to think about there about how that process goes down.
David, you're shaking your head. I'm curious. What's
Well, first of all, as an architect, the contours and grading of land, he manipulated the whole grade of the property. So it's totally feasible. That would not be a barrier. The thing is, do we want to require development to be responsible for those things in our land use regulations? And if the state was going to require him to maintain it, then in my opinion, we should be requiring the developers to maintain it to the standards we set. And so, what it would have impacted maybe was his ability to put those buildings like literally smack dab on the road, which in my opinion are way too close to the road anyway. But so he might have had to reduce his density a little bit. But again, that's what land use regulations.
So David, your suggestion would be that the city should have required Eric to pay the cost for the city to take over Cambridge Creek?
No, I'm saying that they should require Eric to pay the cost of maintaining any improvements in the DOT right of way.
So in other words, make Eric pay to maintain the sidewalks.
Right.
Yeah. And that was done. I was in Pennsylvania doing a job last month, and a small town in Pennsylvania that they required every homeowner, they gave them 5 years to replace the sidewalks on the street in front of their house. And they're responsible for the maintenance. And that passed, and trust me, I know that it doesn't seem this way. Pennsylvania's got the most screwy form of state local government that I've ever seen. And they did that to individual homeowners. So certainly, there's paths there. Fran has had his hand up.
Yes, so I don't want the discussion to become Eric's property, but just to say, so when people complained about his building there and said to me, why is he doing that? My answer was because it's zoned that way and he meets all city requirements. Now it appears that he did not meet a city requirement. So I'm just curious why we approved the project, and maybe that should become part of our statement that we follow through. I mean, if you had to build a sidewalk but couldn't or wouldn't, Todd, why do we approve that project?
I'm in the process of writing the city engineer because they have the authority to waive that requirement. And so if it was waived, it would have to have been done through that department. And I'm trying to find an answer as to further answer on this. Anyway, that's all I know of that at this point, Fran. I don't have a complete answer for you as to why the sidewalk was not implemented.
Okay.
That stretch of Cambridge, other than what Eric has said, but I think it's kind of an incomplete answer. We didn't say we don't want to pay for it, but as Andy has pointed out, that they become the city's property if we, if we're accepting them. So if DOT is saying no, they don't want it, they don't strike deals with developers to say, yeah, you can build it, but as a developer, you have to pay me, the DOT, X amount a year for maintenance. They're not going to enter into an agreement like that. And the city has sort of been hesitant to do that as well, because it works for a while, but you have to sort of be prepared to take over that responsibility. So I'm just trying to find out more answers as to why this was.
So maybe, Bob, the bigger issue here that we can consider is maybe we need to talk about it and think about how requirements get waived and what's that process. You know, is it one office can do that unilaterally? Does it have to go through some system? Right now, it sounds like some of the waiving could be done just by one person or one division without anything else. So maybe the bigger issue, to get off the specifics, would be maybe we need to have a discussion and recommendation about what is the real process for waiving requirements and what has to go through. And maybe it needs to be more rigorous than one person or
one person being able to,
so maybe that's the benefit, or maybe that's a bigger issue for us to think about.
Yeah, because, you know, at the end of the day, you very well, you know, the land regulations could be that, and I get it, that road is state property, and having Eric build something on the state right of way, that then the state is ultimately responsible for. If they don't have a policy that puts it back on the developer, then the regs should be written in a way that says, all right, well, you've got to go up to the right of way, and you've got to put a sidewalk on your property that ties into the sidewalks that are there on that road, on the existing road on 93. And then it's completely the landowners and developers' responsibility at that point. Maintenance.
Fran, for what is, for what it's worth, Fran, that Chris and I have been talking, this is on a couple of occasions, there are about 6 portions of the land regs that delegate to either my office or his the ability to waive certain requirements. And that he and I have talked about this 6 or 8 months ago, that we were not comfortable with that, and that we think it should be a minimum of both of our offices agreeing. So one person couldn't just do it unilaterally, and also to talk about they're already in the land regs some of the criteria under which you can consider waiving the standards, but to spell that out with a little more clarity to take us out of the awkward positions we have found ourselves in from time to time, where it feels too arbitrary, and that we don't think that's a healthy process for the city. So we've been working on some proposals for how to reword those sections. Anyway, just to let you know that we kind of feel the same way you do, Fran, that there is a flaw in that system to delegate that authority to an individual, even though, you know, it was, this is the way council wanted it, and we accepted it. We think that we can make it better. So anyway, that's coming y'all's way as a council with some suggestions for how to address those issues.
Thanks, Todd.
Well, a couple things. First of all, this is not about Eric's property, because that's water over the dam. It's about setting precedent of how we act and how we waive certain things. And cities and towns across the country and throughout South Carolina have sidewalks on state roads. I mean, state roads permeate a vast number of urban streets. And so, I mean, you know, I think the city, if there's a disconnect between the state and the city, then the city needs to sit down with the state and tell them what we're trying to achieve, and first of all, understand if there's a rationale on their part. I mean, it doesn't require the city adopting a state road to require development standards along the right of way. I mean, you know, Charleston, I mean, look at what they just did down on Cannon and Spring Street in Charleston. I'm pretty sure those are state roads, if not, and because it was the old Highway 17. So, but you know, there's state roads in every city in this country, and so there has to be a way to deal with this, and there needs to be a coming together with the highway department, because there is absolutely no rational reason why a public street should not have a sidewalk. Now, there's reasons why it needs to be of a certain type, based on a certain type of road. You know, Highway 123 is maybe a different matter, but a two-lane road in a city, there's absolutely no reason that it can't be done, and that it shouldn't be done, and that there are ways to do it.
So we have a lot to think about there, and a lot of things that we have to consider. There's going to need to be lot of communication, and yeah, we just can't miss these opportunities going forward in the future. All right, what's next, Shannon?
So the impact fees, which is where we started out, that's one potential project for you guys to work on. I think we just identified a second one, which is looking at how requirements get waived. The other ones I came up with, and these are just ideas, so I think it's up to you guys to decide which ones you want to run with first, or how you want to move forward with these, is exploring the idea of developer incentives as a funding mechanism and how that would work. Adding or updating BAR's role in PD approval, whether that's citywide or in catalyst areas. I think that was on an email thread that came through a couple weeks ago. Actually, this number 4 is kind of the same as the first one that we just discussed. Moving forward, if you guys want to be involved with the redevelopment workshop, but that's a little ways off. And then after that redevelopment workshop, coming up with for a process or kind of some ideas for how you want to handle those other catalyst areas going forward. So with the other work groups, what we did was kind of outline the potential projects that came out of the recommendations, and then let the work group members decide, do you want to work on these going forward? Are there do you want to turn these over more to a smaller group with staff? And then these just come back to you for review and updating. I'll say if you want to work on these going forward, it's going to require more than showing up Wednesday morning for a meeting. It's going to require some homework outside of these meetings. So just be prepared for that. So thoughts on how this group wants to move forward?
The other thing that I know I think I've said it in a meeting, and I've heard some side conversations about. Now this is a big one, and obviously this is planning commission, or a recommendation would be that it might be time for us to look at a almost a zero-based approach to rewriting our zoning ordinance and our land use regulations. As one. And I like what's on the list here. I think we could do some things like numbers 1 and 2 might be combined. Mm-hmm. Thinking through funding and incentives. David, I'd like to get your thoughts. Again, we've talked a lot about BAR approval, BAR's role, the teeth that BAR has, what that might look like. And again, I think those that actually has to be kind of it can be a subgroup or integral part of our land use regulations and zoning that might go along with 4 and or 7, obviously.
Well, I mean, I think there's a mix of things that maybe I would suggest reorganizing. First of all, I'd separate the plan development and land use regulation, item 4, into 2 distinct things. I mean, to me, land use regulations apply everywhere. and planned development is a separate and distinct thing. And I think that as we talked, the sidewalks, trails, bikeways, and should be part of land use that are on the property. And then I think you can roll possibly 2 and 3 into a plan development requirements, because again, the conceptual framework for plan development is in fact to trade off prescriptive regulations for opportunities for developers to be creative and do things that gives them greater latitude in some areas, but then they have to make up for that by doing other things. Green space trade-offs, for example, so if you're going to, if you want to, let's say in a planned development, have a lower amount of green space than you develop, then you purchase and develop or protect, preserve green space elsewhere in the city, or height variances in a PD, so that you get additional height allowances for making sure that you're not shading out your neighbors, for example, or density allowances that allows you to build a higher density there, but then preserve land elsewhere, or increase your buffers, or whatever. I mean, that's the whole potential of planned development at a conceptual level, is that it's about allowing developers to creatively figure out how to do some of the things they want to do without negatively impacting others, and providing compensating benefits to the community at large. I think separating PD and land use is one thing I would do, and certainly incentives in PDs are one of the tools in the toolkit, so to speak.
Any other thoughts about this list of projects? Andy, I know that I have been talking about impact fees since the beginning of ClemsonNext and on council. And where are we on looking at our current impact fees and adjusting those as appropriate, and thinking about, making sure that we're maximizing that opportunity?
I believe we have every impact fee we're legally able to impose. One thing I keep looking for is a way to do a transportation one, but we keep getting shut down on that. Something that would be used to fund CAT. Pretty much what I know we can look at is our rates, and that has to be done from engineering analysis, and the engineering has to justify the rate.
Right.
We did that a few years ago. So
right, but we've got a lot of things that are in process that didn't exist a couple of years ago, that I think our rates certainly would be justified. Like, for example, was the Green Crescent Trail, that project and that $20 million worth of stuff included in the last rate?
I don't think it was.
Nettles expansion. We've got, our roads and infrastructure with what we're going to have with our plan moving forward. I guarantee our rates can increase, and probably need to increase based on where we are today and what we weren't thinking about last time it was done.
We could just have engineering include the updated capital budget.
Yeah, but we've got to get to the point where we've got the capital budget for the, $100 million worth of roads and water and sewer infrastructure. And when we make a decision on, a concept moving forward with Nettles Park, when we're, because we've got that as a as a need and a project now, and Green Crescent Trail that is, greater community good, parts of that as well. So there's a lot that's not in our current impact fee rate that
Yeah,
needs to
you can
be
update it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
So-
a matter of having engineering take all that stuff into account and updating the report they did to set the previous ones.
Right. David?
So I've got a question. So our impact fees are based on the next year's budget for infrastructure?
No, it's not that. It's just if we know that we are requiring now Green Crescent Trail bikeways, if we have a $20 million park project on the horizon, things like that need to be paid for, that we just need to, it's more of a long range plan. It's not an immediate type of a thing.
All right, that's what I was assuming it would be, but I was just, when you were talking about the budget. So,
It's so you can build the infrastructure. It's so you have some cash available to take care of the, largely infrastructure needs that you're going to have based on the new pressure that the development puts on you as part of what impact fees are for. I don't know if schools wasn't on the list, but like what Jasper County, they built schools, parks, all kinds of stuff years ago, with impact fees, and the roads, big road improvements and all that kind of stuff. And it was all based on what was going to happen as the projected development occurred. Other questions or comments about this list?
well, the other thing that has come to my mind is all these student developments now have implemented their own shuttle bus systems, which, adds redundancy, takes away ridership from CAT, adds environmental impact, congests our roads. To me, we should be prohibiting those independent shuttle bus systems and requiring developers to fund, a CAT bus, the CAT bus, to the point where there's a level of service that is frankly more efficient than a shuttle bus that any individual development could operate. Tom tells me that he pays to have a CAT bus go out to the pier. Is that right? And so, that's the way we should be going. Now, again, I don't think we should be running the CAT bus as a shuttle bus system, but I think we should be running it as a transit system. But I think if everyone bought in and we avoided these redundancies in service, then I think we could afford and have a more efficient CAT bus system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there a way outside of an impact fee for us for development of a certain type and scale to require a transit fee on an annual basis? We looked a little bit at something in that realm with the parking reduction idea that they would be paying into fund for a parking deck and that kind of thing. But again, there are some things where requiring people to enter into a contract, requiring developers to enter into a contract outside of a PD is, getting into a area in the legal realm that we may not be able to, but we need to look at all these things to make sure that we're not leaving any stones unturned.
Well, I mean, if we require a transit impact fee on the development, then we just set that at a value that makes it a disincentive to have your own redundant service. I mean, I think these developers put this in because CAT bus doesn't operate frequently enough and consistently enough to be an efficient means of getting to campus for students. The other question I have is, I know every student that enrolls in Clemson pays a transit impact fee as part of their fees for going to school. Does the city get any of that money for Cat Bus?
Indirectly through their contract with Cat Bus.
But I mean, we should talk to the university about increasing that fee and negotiating, particularly for students who aren't in dormitories.
Yeah.
That fee should almost all go to the city.
Yeah. True. Yeah, it should. Well, they say, well, it's when they come to campus and park. It's like, well, you don't need to build parking lots or parking decks at $30,000 a spot if you
Right.
we create a better public transit system.
Right.
So, all right. Other comments here.
I thought 3B probably should be under the impact fee, right? Is that right? Because that wouldn't necessarily be a land use regulation, would it?
Those are two items I put here because it was related to you guys, but the traffic group is taking those on.
Okay.
So I just wanted you to see that they were there and it was kind of related to what we've been discussing in land use too, but the traffic group is taking those on.
Okay. All right, we are at 9:20. What else was on the agenda, Shannon?
Well, hang on one second. That was it. Going through the project ideas, determining, and I'll rewrite them based on how we discussed splitting them up today. As PD, looking at the PD requirements, looking at the land use requirements, what things we've discussed fall under each. The impact fees, which sounds like we're going to turn over to staff, looking at that. And then just things to think about going forward. The Uptown redevelopment workshop, keeping that on your radar. Starting to think about how you want to handle those other catalyst areas.
Okay.
And planning for those, and then anything else. And then just like I discussed a little bit ago, deciding, do you guys want to be involved in, hands-on working on these projects? Do you just want monthly updates on these projects? You don't have to pick all three. If you've got one, like if you want to be really involved in the PD, looking at the PD requirements and updating those, we can split up into smaller groups and have a couple of people looking at each of these items. But I'd like to know from you guys as a group how you want to move forward.
Hey, this is Elaine. I like the idea of smaller groups, and I'd be very interested in working on reevaluating the PD requirements and process.
Okay.
I'll work with Elaine on that one.
Okay.
I mean, they're all good. It's just what's our carrying capacity as a committee? And do we want to prioritize these things, I guess, is in terms of the sequence in which we tackle them. Because we're all busy people. I mean, I think we should prioritize them, sequence them, and I think they're all worthy and worth tackling. But we can't do them all at one time based on what I'm sensing of the energy level of the group.
So Shannon and Bob, and I guess everybody, are there any of these one or two or three that are crucial for the other groups recommendations to move forward that really are foundational for a lot of the other work going on, that I guess this gets back to David's notion of prioritizing, that like the PD thing is pretty essential, I think, but which of these really needs to be done for some of the other group recommendations to also move forward? Any of them that are essential?
I guess if you're going to explore updating the land use regulations, that's something. And like I said, the traffic group's kind of looking into that a little bit. We're working with the CAT bus team on that a little bit. But if you guys feel like the PD, looking at the PD regulations is the most essential place to start, let's start there.
I think the other one is and I know staff is going down that road, but the fees and the incentives are going to be critically important.
Would you
But
guys?
I also think that the redevelopment workshop is going to help us like figure some things out in that world.
Would you guys like me to work with Andy, figure out who needs to look at the impact fees and incentives, come up with some ideas around that and bring it back to you?
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right, anything else on these projects? And any old business? The Uptown Redevelopment Workshop, for those of you that weren't on the first meeting, council's meeting at noon today to look at the 4 submissions, the 4 responses we got to the RFP. So there could be some news about how we're going to move forward with that this afternoon. And it seems like there was one other thing that Fran, you've got your hand
Just a
raised.
reminder to everybody that the ClemsonNext public sessions next week to urge and help get people to come to those.
Yeah, and Shannon, so Shannon, in addition to everything else that we're going to do, if people can push that out on Nextdoor, Facebook, and all the usual suspect groups. In addition to, if we're going to do some flyers, if you've got some places you could put flyers up this weekend and get those out, that would be extremely helpful.
And you're not expecting, are you expecting us to be at all 3? I can't be at the last one.
Yes, David,
No.
you need to be at all of them all day long. And in between, you need to be sitting there thinking about what you're going to do to, no, not at all.
If you could all just pick one to attend, that would be great.
I'll take, I think the midday one.
Okay.
I'm going to try to be at all 3 of them, Shannon.
Okay.
But
And I'm
Corey has
anxious.
jury duty and Finn's in a camp, so I think I got to figure those things out. Anything else? All right, with that, we will adjourn, and Shannon and I are meeting tomorrow morning at 9 to kind of regroup after our couple of weeks hiatus. And we will be in touch with any updates at that point. And let's plan on meeting again next week. And maybe a little bit more of a plan going forward with how these work groups might begin to look and form up.
I noticed Chris volunteered for the plan development group too, but she sent the message directly to me. I think she may be
Oh,
away.
sorry about that. Yeah,
Mhm.
put me down for that.
Okay.
All right, everybody have a good day and good rest of your week.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Bye.
Everyone. Okay.
They,